Hey everyone, Damien from Triibe here with Carly,
Hi.
and so talking more about vulnerability and part of this vulnerability challenge. And one of the important things to consider in vulnerability is actually when is it inappropriate. Apologies about the dog. So when is vulnerability inappropriate, or what is too much information? What is too much vulnerability? And so I'm going to talk about three different distinctions around places where we might need to be intentional or quite aware of our vulnerability and the impacts it might have on ourselves or others in that dynamic. So the first distinction that I've been thinking about is when I choose to share or reveal myself, vulnerability being this revealing of myself out into the world, to someone who may not be ready or willing to receive it. So this distinction around like basically just projecting everything out onto another person. Like I just come in, I might be like, hey Carly, I've been having a really bad day, and I just start telling him everything that's going on in my life without ever actually checking in.
Yeah, and for me that could be like dumping, like, oh man, like you're dumping all this stuff on me. I'm not in the space to receive it.
Yeah, and if I'm particularly charged and worked up, I might not even notice that you're not in the place to receive it, and maybe you go into a kind of a freeze state and just kind of like listen with this sense. I'm sure other people have done it. I've definitely done it when someone's sharing themselves too much and I don't want to interrupt them. I don't want to be rude and stop them and say, hey, actually, and like I'm just kind of like a bit overwhelmed by their sharing.
Yeah, like I'm captive audience to it, I'm like held hostage a little bit to like this person sharing all this stuff with me.
Yeah. So I think when, like, if I'm wanting to share like parts of myself with another, whether that's really awesome parts, like maybe I want to share how amazing and incredible things are going on for me in my life at the moment, and the person I'm wanting to share it is actually not feeling that great about themselves, and that's going to actually hurt them in some way. Yeah. Or I'm feeling quite upset and I want to be heard by someone, and I share with someone and they're actually feeling really good and don't really, or they're distracted, or they have something else going on and they're not in the space to receive that.
Yep.
So something important to do there, I think, is to check in and be like, before I want to share with someone, be like, hey, I've got something going on for me and I'd really love to share with you. Are you willing to receive?
Yeah, nice. Yeah, so to me, like the context is really important, and that's what I'm hearing you speak to there, like, do I actually have a context that can hold my vulnerability? Is the other person in a space to actually fully receive it? And I even asked if they're willing to listen to me and hear the things that are going on for me and to negotiate that shared context. Otherwise, it could actually be a little bit violating. I could be violating somebody else's boundaries if they're not actually in that readiness to receive what I want to share. And so it's actually in a containment boundary, right? I'm containing myself and being aware of the impact that I'm having on other people and checking for that impact.
Yeah, totally. So that's one distinction around vulnerability, is being aware of my impact, or the way that I'm going to be sharing myself outwards, and the impact on the other people.
When you wave your hand around, the light changes.
Light changes.
Woo. Freaky.
Yeah. The second distinction that I've been thinking about that is when I've had experiences in my life where I've revealed myself to people and then it's actually come back to bite me in the ass. So I haven't perhaps been judicious around who I want to share with and what I want to share with, and that's come back and almost been weaponized against me, and that can be really hurtful.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I was sharing with you before an example for me where I had that happen at work, and I shared places that I was feeling overwhelmed and kind of was struggling to actually keep up with the work, and then the person I told that to was then kind of used it against me to say, hey, can you not do this job? You're not being professional enough, or something like that. And it was quite hurtful to receive that.
Yeah, yes. I've had places or connections or people that I thought I was developing a close friendship with, who, when I shared some of the deeper layers around what's going on for me, or like how I might feel withdrawn or something like that, they've actually then gone and used that against me and kind of like shamed me for it in a way at later events. Like it's come up in later discussions where they've kind of used that against me. so I think of this as a boundary.
Protection boundary, right?
Protection
now
boundary.
I need to protect myself. Yes.
So there has to be an awareness and a judicion, like on my part, around who I'm going to share with and what I'm going to share, because we're human beings and we're social creatures and we talk to each other, and you know, and we can't necessarily control what someone else is going to say or do with the information we give to them.
Yeah, and this is where, like, you know, vulnerability is the places that we could get hurt, right? So am I actually protecting myself, and do I know that, you know, my vulnerability is going to be honoured? And maybe I might even want to ask for it. You know, this goes back to the setting context piece, you know, like I might ask for somebody to, hey, like, I feel really vulnerable about this, and, you know, can you please respect, you know, that I could get hurt by sharing this thing, and can you please, like, not just go and gossip about this, because, you know, I'm trusting you with this information. You know, so actually asking for that trust, I think, is can be quite important.
Totally. And I'm struck by, in one of your earlier videos, you were talking about vulnerability being a risk. And so this is part of the risk in vulnerability, that I don't know what's going to happen. When I share myself, I don't know what's going to happen with that. I'm putting myself out into the world, and I may be received and loved for it. I may also not be. I may be rejected for it. So I don't actually know. So there is an onus on me to be conscious around, who I want to share with and what I want to share with them. And this may be like, take some time to calibrate. I'm likely going to make mistakes, and I've made mistakes, you know, on this journey of, like, make those mistakes and then get, you know, kind of feel the impacts of that and something going a little bit wrong, and then I have to recalibrate and take a little bit more time and attention on that. Yeah, and
I love that you bring up calibration. I think that's a really important piece of this. And this is where actually I think playing with sharing ourselves vulnerably, you know, it does require calibration. It doesn't require a little bit of kind of trial and error, you know, to see how we land with people and see what happens. And, you know, I think it's important to actually be willing to make some mistakes in that. And it's actually the process of being calibrated, in a sense, in the sharing of authenticity, that we're then actually going to be able to most easily do that generally.
Totally. So that's the second one. And then the third kind of distinction is around, what is my intent in sharing? When I reveal myself vulnerably, what is my intent? And so this comes down to one of the distinctions that we outline in our free mini course, the Authentic Challenge, whether we relate to connect or we relate to control. So when I'm sharing with myself with somebody, is my intention actually to get closer, to actually create a deeper connection with them? Or maybe do I have a subtle intention to get something? There's a result that I want. I want them to get closer to me in a way, like I'm trying to hook them, or I want to manipulate them in some way or another.
Totally. Yeah. You know, I think it can be so easy for, you know, the places in which we're feeling vulnerable, where, you know, it's kind of quite often places that we feel hurt, you know, and then there can be some resentment, you know, like, you know, maybe I feel a bit resentful towards somebody and I want them to do something differently, and then sharing my vulnerability actually comes out, you know, as a blame, you know. It might even be that explicit. It might be this kind of just subtle way in which I'm sharing my hurt, but I'm subtly in the subtext saying, and you hurt me, right? And so, yeah.
And you hurt me, and I want you to do something about it. Or I want you to feel bad. You know, sometimes I might be sharing my vulnerability in a way where I'm actually trying to get the other person to feel guilty, or I'm trying to get them to apologize to me, or I'm trying to get them to do something for me in some way, form or another.
Yes, yeah. And this one to me is so subtle. You know, it's like a lot of the time I think our intentions aren't even that clear to us. You know, it can require quite a bit of like checking in. Like, hang on, what am I really wanting by saying this? And I think that's really important. You know, like, sometimes we can share vulnerably and it's like feels like a bit of a release, but does it actually really get us the outcome that we want with this person? You know, is it actually leading to more connection and deepening our relationship with the person? You know, and so easily that cannot be the case.
Yeah. And for me, I think like vulnerability is largely around creating connection and intimacy. It's around revealing more of myself into a connection with another person, in the hopes that I'm seen and welcome and embraced by them, and as a result we have a deeper connection and we have more intimacy between us.
Yes.
You know, that's the ultimate intention behind it. And then we have to be to navigate this dance between, you know, are they wanting that? Do they actually want that with me? Are they safe? You know, so there's that containment issue of like, oh, do they actually want that with me or not? So I'm checking for context. Are they a safe person to do that with? So I'm checking for am I able to protect myself in relation to this person? You know, am I going to share something that may actually come back to get me? So I have to have some awareness around what I'm doing, and then what is my intention?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and I love that you use the term like weaponize, where people can like weaponize the things that we've shared them with, and the vulnerable things, and kind of use them against us somehow. And this is like us weaponizing our own vulnerability, right?
Totally.
Where now I'm using my vulnerability as a form of manipulation, essentially, to get what I want.
Yep.
You know? And it's, to me, it's actually still another boundary issue, right? Now we're kind of, you know, it's a much more subtle level of a kind of thinking boundary level of, you know, what's behind, am I actually using my vulnerability to control or not? You know, so there's actually a containment there versus actually just being clear, you know, and to me it's so much more powerful just to ask what we want, you know, and let somebody else be who they are, and if they can't meet kind of what we want, what our needs are, then we've just got to seek other options, you know, and that's such a much more healthy way of expressing our vulnerability, and where it's not actually being used to get something, we're just saying this is what's true for us, and based on that, you know, this is what I'm going to do when I want.
So what really strikes me around this practice of being more vulnerable is that on the surface it can seem quite simple. I just share more of myself into the world, but there's actually layers of nuance in there. So there's like there's layers of self-awareness and also a relational awareness that goes into this dance of intimacy, this dance of vulnerability, of sharing and receiving.
Totally. You know, I'm quite keen to keep sharing around some of these nuances, because this to me is where the art of all of this comes into play, where, you know, we need to kind of practice and you know, develop skillful means of how to share authenticity and vulnerability in a way that also honors other people.
Totally.
Yeah. Nice.
Cool.
Awesome. I love this. Thank you. I'd love to hear how this makes sense to people out there watching.
Yeah, and any questions, I'd love to like engage more of a dialogue around this as well. I think it's really deep and nuanced, and there's a lot to it.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks,
Cool.
David.